What? Think you can give me some competition?
Sure, I'll try.
That's what I like to hear. Kid who isn't afraid to lose. No, I got it. I want to take your money. You ready?
Welcome to Heroes 3, the bi-weekly podcast where three friends explore the best, worst, and everything in between in the world of Asian cinema. And this week we are getting ready to dive into the films of Bruce Lee, which is a long time coming arc of movies. But to kind of get us in the mood for it, in the right zone for it, Carlos has put together this really cool list of Bruce Lees in video games. I'm adding the S because I think it's funny. But
yeah, so much of your life has led to this moment, I feel like.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, it's Carlos and Marty are joining us as always.
Yeah.
So I mixed up with the intro there.
Yep. And I mean, I right out the gate, of course, video games are a visual medium. But I think there's a lot to be said about how iconic Bruce Lee is, and this will leap beyond audio and into your brains. We'll describe his appearances in video games. And I was thinking about things a bit, too, and, I mean, as we talk about the films, this ends, Bruce Lee's career ends at the beginning of the 70s. Video games, as a genre, as a medium, are nowhere near their birth. I mean, maybe kind of close, like Space War. What is it?
Yeah, let's say the earliest video games is like, or it's like mid 70s.
Yeah,
like,
but nobody wants to play that. Come on.
But yeah, that is. Yeah, you got Space War. You got Pong. Yeah, a couple other little things like that, and video games are very much a kind of a weird novelty that's at skeevy bars next to pinball machines.
Yeah.
So definitely not where it will be in a decade from then.
Yeah, I think it wasn't until something like Space Invaders that, I mean, would be a game that I would care about playing regularly.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you can only imagine what Bruce would have done with that medium. It feels like something he would have gotten excited about. Plenty of ideas.
Yes, totally. I totally agree with that. And you can also think, oh, he's an older type, so maybe by the time video games are coming out, that would be something he wouldn't be interested in. But one of the things I do think about Bruce Lee is he always was trying new things, and to advance himself, to advance like his passion, that was martial arts. And he also was very like a proud person, and I could see them kind of bringing to him, hey, Bruce Lee, this is a new thing, it's called a video game, and he'd be like, oh, I could deliver my message through that somehow. And I mean, even going into the 90s, and we're going to talk about fighting games, of course, I could see Bruce Lee maybe finding an appeal in something like a fighting game. For me, loving fighting games for basically almost all my life. And as I got better in fighting games and understanding the mechanics, there's a term that I don't know if I've mentioned on the podcast, but if you're a fighting game player, it's a term that you've heard called footsies. And footsies is basically kind of like playing in the space between your character and your opponent's character and capitalizing on their mistakes and knowing the range of their attacks and the range of your attacks. And a highly skilled fighting game match, anytime the match starts, that's what you're seeing, is that kind of play, the back and forth between two characters. And the way of the intercepting fist, Bruce Lee's philosophy in martial arts, in Jeet Kune Do, that's actually almost like a direct comparison between footsies and Jeet Kune Do. I mean, it's a very base thing, and it's entertainment. I'm not comparing video game play to martial arts and a discipline like that. But
it just means it's a good translation of how that works in real life to like a gameplay format, so you can feel a little bit of that without having to spend, years and years of your life training to do that.
And one of the most rewarding things to me in fighting games is making that right guess and capitalizing it in the most optimal way. It just feels so good. And it's just one of the things that I like about fighting games. And it's one of the things that I love to see about fighting as as a sport and in martial arts in general. And I mean, obviously we get to see a lot of that in a lot of the films that we covered, but before we talk about fighting games, we got to get to like the early beginnings of Bruce Lee in video games.
Oh
And
man, I'm excited.
it's always going to be clumsy, and then there's going to be an appeal where you're going to be buying something just because you're interested in Bruce Lee, right? So actually the first Bruce Lee game that I looked up it's just called Bruce Lee. This is 1984, and we're gonna go chronologically. And it was released on the Atari, the ZX Spectrum, the Commodore 64, PC-88, and MSX.
Oh, dude.
So
Super
like,
cross-platform.
yeah. And like so many games from that time, it's gonna be a screen-to-screen
Terrible.
like platformer.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, well, so
And like wildly different from on each console.
yeah, actually
yeah.
pretty close. I mean,
Oh, that's cool.
honestly, yeah, they do seem pretty close. So you're playing as Bruce Lee, and you're going from screen to screen, and it ends up feeling like almost like a big maze, almost like a proto Metroidvania. You know, that word is such a fun word to use, but you're going through, and you have to collect these little lanterns, and you actually like it
in
says
the
in the
movie.
description, yeah, that you're going through a wizard's tower. You're seeking wealth and immortality. And Bruce Lee, little guy, but it kind of represents him well.
That's kind of too soon. Like the Bruce Lee game is like you're seeking immortality.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Well, there's that's something we're also going to encounter a little bit. In a way, this is also a form of Bruceploitation. And
Right.
as far as I know, I mean, these were all Western developed. The some of the earlier, actually maybe not, but some of the Western ones, you can tell they are very generous with Bruce Lee as a figure and Bruce Lee in a kind of Oriental way.
Yeah.
Wow,
So
clear, gotcha.
yeah, it looks really weird. I think you fight like sumo characters in it, and but there's like these little things where you find keys and you can get through barriers, and there's some video of it on YouTube. And as far as
Yeah,
music
I'm actually
goes,
I watching. I kind of flipped through a couple of the different versions because I love looking at like the weird differences between versions of those old games. And the Atari 800 version of it, the little sprite actually looks more like Jackie Chan from Wheels on Meals than
sure.
Oh, cool.
than Bruce. Like it's weird that this tiny pixel figure can look like that, but it has like the pose with like the black gloves and the black pants.
I was
and no
gonna
shirt.
say, I think it's the gloves.
And more of
yeah.
like Jackie's hair, kind of like
Yeah.
mop top thing. Yeah.
Yeah, but we're talking about
as much as you can do that in
In
a
like 2
Atari
pixels.
game,
Yeah.
but,
right. It's pretty crude. So also in 1984, Japanese developer Konami, one of my favorites, they released Yi Are Kung Fu. Which is an arcade game. It was also ported to the Nintendo, and the arcade and the home ports are a little different. So the main character is named Oolong in the arcade version, but in the home version, his name is Lee. And actually, the last fighter that you encounter in the arcade version is Blues. It was localized as Blues, but he's a shirtless fighter, and I'm pretty sure that was a mistranslation of
it should have been Bruce.
Yep.
Gotcha.
And I guess for our tastes, the composer for the NES version was Miki Higashino, who does
Oh,
some
dude.
amazing
She's the
work
bomb.
on the Nintendo.
Gradius master.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So I really like the look of that game. It's really simple, but you have a lot of varied attacks actually. So depending on the angle of your stick placement, you can do like a high kick or a low kick or a jump kick. And I like the kind of crude like outlines of the characters, so I think that looks really cool. Again, I mean, this is a visual thing, so I honestly I feel like I'll do a blog post to accompany this episode, and I've been grabbing audio clips too, so you're probably hearing some audio from each game as we go through the episode. Again, we're here in 1984, and this is actually something that we've already talked about, actually going way back to the beginning. And Matthew, you mentioned Jackie Chan, but Kung Fu Master, developed by IRM and actually ported to the Nintendo by Nintendo themselves.
Yeah,
and
known only as Kung Fu on the home version.
Yeah, legendary game. So many people enjoyed this game. Yep, and it was originally based on Game of Death, and then I forget what the reason was, because this is all post, all of these films, but then it was actually reworked to be Spartan X: Wheels on Meals. And the game was designed by Takashi Nishiyama, and he would go on to create Street Fighter and Fatal Fury. And actually, for this episode, I realized that he's the founder of the company Dimps. So Dimps actually is the company that developed Street Fighter 4 for Capcom. So
oh wow.
Yeah, so it's crazy
Years
how
years
like
circle.
all that
That's
goes
amazing.
around. I love it. And you in Kung Fu Master, you play as Thomas from Wheels on Meals, and you're climbing the Devil's Temple pagoda to defeat many enemies and save Sylvia from Mr. X. So there's a little bit of liberties here, but similar to Game of Death.
Do you think it's possible that like Bruce Lee's estate, it just took a few years to kind of fight back against kind of unauthorized likeness stuff?
That very well could be. I don't know for sure, but what I do know is historically they're very strict with using Bruce Lee for stuff. And any time
His estate, yeah,
any time that anything comes out that they didn't really kind of have like a thumbs up for or hand, they're always saying something about it. But yeah, I mean, I love Kung Fu. Koji Kondo did the music for Kung Fu on NES. Some really great material from there, and
yeah, it's mostly the ending.
Yeah.
Otherwise, the rest of the music was in the original arcade
Yep.
version. I can't
And when
remember the
you-
composer on that.
yeah, when you hear that, you can totally hear Koji Kondo right there.
Yeah, for sure.
It's awesome. Okay, so moving a little bit forward, the next game that I have on our list is from 1987. This is China Warrior. This is from Hudson, and it was released for the PC Engine, the TurboGrafx 16. So it's basically like the big brother to Kung Fu. You have a much larger sprite in the game. You play as a character named Wong.
I'm looking at video now, and the sprite is obnoxiously big.
It's huge.
That's awesome.
It's like a good quarter of the screen.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where, this is the next generation.
Yeah.
But that doesn't always serve the game well. Because I've played it quite a bit. And one of the things is that you're just so huge that everything just hits you. So you're walking basically through each stage. And just like Kung Fu, enemies approach you and you can take them out. And the character looks basically just exactly like Bruce Lee. But the other thing is, like, most of the characters you're fighting against look like these hooded druids. And then there's also like bees and like rocks that fly at you.
Classic.
It's very strange.
Classic Bruce Lee villains.
Yep. And
Yeah, for sure.
like a lot of games, they reuse a lot of assets as you play through the game, and then just change the palette. So you'll fight recurring characters that look very similar. There's like kind of a big military-looking guy. Actually, there's like a Jackie-looking boss in the game that you fight a couple of times, and the final boss of the game actually looks like a beggar soul, like a drunken master.
Oh, cool.
Oh,
So
cool.
hot,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's really cool. And
So
the
kind of like
music's
a potluck of like kung fu movies or something.
yeah, and that's also something that I mean,
I
especially
think
when we get
that's pretty common.
when we get to the 90s, it's just all over the place.
Mhm.
So okay, one of my favorites, and I'm really excited to talk about this, is 1987, 1988, Double Dragon by Technos.
Oh, yeah.
Technos
Yeah, dude.
Japan. First released in
Classic.
the arcade and then released on the Nintendo. It wasn't. I mean, when I was a kid, there wasn't really a direct relation to Bruce Lee for me. I just loved the game. I thought it was cool, and I knew Jimmy and Billy Lee were the main characters. But
Bimmy and Jimmy.
yeah, Bimmy and Jimmy, the Double Dragon 2, I think. And
Yeah.
but just like when in the recent years, one of the producers of Double Dragon had like a really cool thread on Twitter talking about the origins of the game, and he went into the inspirations, and actually Billy and Jimmy Lee are Lee intentionally because they're based on Bruce Lee. Maybe not
Awesome.
visually, yeah, but thematically, they're directly influenced by the works of Bruce Lee. So actually, Billy is named Billy Lee because it's like Billy Lowe from like Game of Death. And
nice.
yeah, so not only that, but much of the original cast was named after characters in Enter the Dragon. And so like the gang members that you fight, there's a Roper, who is John Saxon's character. There's a Williams, Jim Kelly, and actually a Bobo, the kind of iconic big thug in Double Dragon, was originally Bolo, and based on Bolo Young. So I thought that was really cool. And then, there's also an O'Hara, who is also in Enter the Dragon. That's Bob Wall's character. And there's one of the villains, one of the female characters, her name is Linda. And I mean, you could honestly argue that Linda is named Linda because of Linda Lee. So I thought that was really cool when I saw that. And just seeing those like connections being so direct was really, really fun to me. Looking into that a little deeper, there was a not that great live action version of Double Dragon, and but Mark Dacascos actually played Jimmy Lee in the live action.
April is coming up pretty soon, so
yeah, yep. So the other kind of fun thing that I found was that the director of Super Double Dragon on Super Nintendo and Double Dragon Advanced, his name is Muneki Ebinuma. And actually, he's known in some places as Ebinuma Lee, and he injected a lot of Bruce Lee in his games. So Billy and Jimmy had strong posing like Bruce Lee, and the main image of Double Dragon Advanced is actually a direct riff off of the kind of iconic shot of Chuck Norris and Bruce Lee posed together from Way of the Dragon.
Oh, dude, great catch.
Yeah, it's super, super, super cool. And I mean, I love Double Dragon, and actually I think
Double Dragon's a classic.
yeah, one of my first like kind of realizations about video game music was like the title screen for Double Dragon on Nintendo. Like I literally would just stop and just listen to it. Yeah, it was so good.
Do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's funny. I realized I'm not sure if outside of maybe seeing it like actually at an arcade or at like a MagFest or something, I don't think I had ever seen the arcade version of it. I'd seen the NES one so many times.
Yeah, talk about larger sprites.
Yeah. And I think
in the video that I'm watching, it looks like the game's about to fall apart.
Yeah,
like it's moving so janky.
But that's how the game moves. Like the scrolling's really weird, and the frame rate's kind of weird. It's also uses like I forget which Yamaha chip, but it's an FM synth soundtrack, and there are some tracks that are kind of rough, but I kind of have a soft. Yes, exactly. It's that era of FM, synthesis. But I don't know. I remember I played it like in one spot, and I was like, "This isn't like the one that I like on Nintendo." Because the Nintendo version had like this kind of cool leveling up too. Like after you got so many points, you'd get more moves, and you didn't know what the move was, but you'd do it on accident, and you're like, "Holy crap! Well, what did I just do?"
What's that caliber of port where it's almost like a special edition and kind of like further refining the like the game and yeah, I think with a lot of the arcade soundtracks of this period, I mean, some of them are so well adapted to the NES, so like I definitely prefer them, just like the tightness of the arrangement and
I feel the same
stability
way.
I guess even of the instruments, you know.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I mean, I could talk about Double Dragon all day, but we'll move forward a little bit. The next game that I have is from 1989, and it's called Bruce Lee Lives. Yikes! It's from a company called the Software Toolworks, and this is for the MS-DOS.
Dude, nice.
Oh, fun!
Yeah,
I can like picture the giant box already.
Yeah, and it's kind of that typical thing where it doesn't look that great. It looks better than like the stuff I was talking about before, like on the ZX and stuff like that. So you play as Bruce Lee, and it's also, real quick, it's also known as Bruce Lee Fall of the Hong Kong Palace. And in this game, you play as Bruce Lee, and you defend the Hong Kong Palace from destruction by the evil Master Po and his gang.
Dude, nice.
Yeah,
does it have
cool
like internal computer sound audio?
It's pretty rough. So, but one interesting thing that I saw when I was looking the game up is that like one of the like early screens, like on the intro of the game, it's like a really simple melody, but I recognized it, and it actually is like a riff. It's like a Ryuichi Sakamoto, like from YMO, like one of my favorite bands. He did the soundtrack to a film called Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, and that main theme is like a really iconic melody, and it's totally like in. I grabbed an audio clip from it, so we'll probably be hearing it. I was like, oh, wait a second. But the game itself is pretty basic. You just encounter a handful of enemies. So it's basically like a one-player fighting game. And you defeat each of the guys until you get to the end. And actually, it's pretty funny. One of the playthroughs that I watched, at the end, the last character he's fighting, he dies. And the ending of the game is like it's like a newspaper. And it's just like, Bruce Lee dies, found dead in his apartment. I'm like, dang.
Wow.
Cool.
That's messed up.
It kind of, looking at the views of it now, it kind of looks like Karateka or Karateka. I actually have no idea how you're supposed to say it, but
yeah, Karateka.
Yeah, it looks Karateka. Yeah, it kind of looks like that. Not with like the beautiful like rotoscope animation, but the same like gameplay kind of thing. Yeah,
totally. Yeah. So, okay, we're leaving the 80s and we're going into the 90s, the best decade in history.
So let's say turn your baseball cap to the side.
Yep. I got my pump up sneakers.
Bring out the tube.
Yep. Yeah. So, 1992. Now we have Mortal Kombat in the arcade first. Midway. Man, it's basically Enter the Dragon meets Big Trouble in Little China. And in this game, we have Liu Kang. So Liu Kang is the hero of the first handful of Mortal Kombat games. He's a Shaolin monk, and he's a defender of the Earth Realm. In Mortal Kombat, you are defending the Earth Realm from originally Shang Tsung, and then after that Shao Kahn from the Outer World. They're trying to defeat it's like if they lose 10 tournaments, then the Outworld will come and take over. And he is the hero of the game and definitely influenced by Bruce Lee. He's got the shirtless, muscle bod. He's got the black baggy pants, and the vocalizations in Mortal Kombat are legendary, and he's no exception. In Mortal Kombat 1, totally. It's just kind of like the wudo. But I mean, for me, my favorite is Mortal Kombat 2. He's got the bicycle kick, and it's basically
the classic.
Yep. And so actually I looked into this a little bit, and John Tobias, one of the creators, along with Ed Boon, he cited Bruce Lee and Gordon Liu as equally inspiring to Liu Kang. And if you look at his name, Liu, that Liu in Liu Kang, I'm sure is a reference to Gordon Liu. And that was enlightening to me. I never even considered that. So the kind of cool thing about Mortal Kombat, and before Mortal Kombat there was Pit Fighter, and that game and Mortal Kombat used digitized sprites. So they would take basically photos and create frames out of these real actors and place them into the game. They're based out of Chicago, and Ed Boon and John Tobias, they had a friend that they wanted to put in the game. So Liu Kang was played by Ho Sung Pak, and we've actually talked about him on the podcast. Totally. He was originally going to be one of the heavies in Drunken Master 2, but unfortunately he suffered an injury, and it sounded like he had kind of a rough time during filming, and he kind of was sidelined toward the end of the film. But really awesome. I think he's super cool. I was a big fan of Mortal Kombat. I was a big fan of Kung Fu movies. I was also a big fan of Ninja Turtles, and he was.
I was gonna say, wasn't he the one that was? He was one of the guys in the suits.
Yeah, so he was the stunt double for Raphael in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2. He was also listed as a stunt coordinator, which is so cool. And there's some really great set photos of him in the suit alongside some of the other Mortal Kombat actors. And
that's so cool.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. There was also a fun show that I liked when I was a kid. I don't know how it's aged, but it was basically like wrestling but martial arts. It was called WMAC Masters, and it would air on Saturday mornings, and it was basically like a live action show where all these martial artists played characters and they'd have to fight each other. And it was kind of a riff on fighting games too, because they'd have life bars and stuff. But Ho Sung Pak was on that show, and I believe his older brother was also on the show. I think his name is Ho Young Pak. So I watched that for a little while. That was fun. But yeah, Mortal Kombat, come on. Like, so much fun. Yeah. And still a strong series, like, to this day. Like, I think there's something about Mortal Kombat that kind of has, like, kind of a wider appeal. It's definitely more of a Western flavored fighting game and developed in the West, but I think that there's still a lot of fun in the series. It's not maybe my favorite fighting game series, but I guess similar to wrestling. I don't really like wrestling, but I like all the kind of fun little things about wrestling, like moves and stuff. So
like everything around it, but not necessarily the thing itself.
Yeah.
I totally get that.
Yeah, and that's how I feel.
You're talking about Mortal Kombat. I feel like obviously a ton of people in America specifically were super inspired by those Hong Kong movies and, watched a lot of like the chop socky kind of stuff from the 70s and 80s. But I feel like Mortal Kombat, they kind of got it the best out of a lot of people that like went on to make movies and games and stuff.
Yeah, no, that's well put.
It doesn't like, it's a little bit, but definitely doesn't feel quite as like exotic orientalist as some other stuff. Like, it kind of gets what made those things special without making it this weird, like, Chinese mysticism kind of racist stuff. So
yeah, and that stuff is definitely there, but the way that it's kind of thrown together is kind of like in a fun, like, love letter way to me, and it's campy. Like, Mortal Kombat was so controversial when it came out, but when you see it, it's goofy. It's basically like Looney Tunes to me.
And like, even the violence and stuff is like, and that's this is a different episode, but it's thing with the more recent ones, I feel like they went so like gruesome with a lot of the stuff that I feel like they're forgetting, like, remember whenever the guy like has like 15 rib cages that fly out of him whenever they hit him, like, it was always like completely silly and over the top and Not like you didn't feel like gross after you did a
Right,
fatality.
right.
You're just like, oh man.
Yeah, the new generation of Mortal Kombat games kind of lean on that realism a little too hard, which is unfortunate. But yeah, I totally agree. Like Mortal Kombat 3, you literally had like somebody's skeleton jumping out of them and running away, which is too fun. Or like in Mortal Kombat 2, Liu Kang would literally drop a Mortal Kombat arcade cabinet on his opponent.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the fun stuff. But yeah, so that's Mortal Kombat. And moving forward, we're in the era of fighting games now. So this is where, my eyes light up. And there's a Neo Geo game kind of co-developed by SNK and ADK, another company called World Heroes. So this came out in 1992. And the Bruce Lee analog in this game, his name is Kim Dragon. So the kind of crux of World Heroes is they pull characters from different times and throw them together. So it's a really goofy fighting game, but it's kind of fun in its own way. There's like a Joan of Arc character. There's a Viking.
that's cool.
Yeah, there's a Rasputin in the game, which is really weird, and he's played for laughs the whole time, which is super strange.
Oh man.
But Kim Dragon is a direct riff on Bruce Lee. He's got the iconic black pants and shirtless top, just in Enter the Dragon, like Liu Kang before him. And actually, so there's a couple of interesting facts about him. Kim was from China in World Heroes 1, like his nationality, but after that he would be known to be from South Korea. So the company SNK.
So was he known as Kim Dragon when he was from China
Yes.
as well? Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So the company itself, the president of SNK, his at the time his name is Kim Kafwan. Carlos jumping in to fact check Carlos. Yes, Kim Kafwan, the namesake of the Fatal Fury character, but he was not the president of SNK. He was actually the chairman of the South Korean company Viacom. They had a strong relationship with SNK, and he was quite the character himself. He was reportedly a third dan in Taekwondo and really wanted to promote Taekwondo and South Korea in the games that he was involved with. So with his strong relationship with SNK, they named the Fatal Fury character after him. And actually, what I've read is that some other Taekwondo practitioners in SNK games were named for members of his family, which is pretty crazy. And Kim Dragon, who we're talking about today, reportedly also named after Kim Kafwan. So yeah, get your facts straight, Carlos, or I'm coming for you. So in the game, Kim is a famous martial artist, and he's a movie star, and he's basically setting out to prove his strength in this tournament. So that's a kind of like cookie cutter Bruce Lee analog, and he has kind of fun, his sound effects are really cool. He does the Bruce Lee watas really well, and he's got a rising dragon kick where he's surrounded in a flaming dragon aura. And he has some kind of Kenshiro style, multiple fist attacks too. And I mean, mentioning Kenshiro, obviously Kenshiro is a analog for Bruce Lee in a way, but I don't see him as directly a video game character, although there were a lot of Fist of the North Star games, and it's just super fun to see him in a game. But I think he's kind of a honorable mention when it comes to this list that I've got going on. And I mean, I'm sure that there are some kind of smaller references that I might be missing, but these are all the notable characters that I thought to make this list.
No, dude, it's amazing how comprehensive this is. Wow.
Oh, thanks. So all right, now here we go, dude. 1993.
This is the big one.
Dude.
Super Street Fighter 2, The New Challengers. Capcom riding high. I think this is the fourth version of Street Fighter 2. Back in the day when video game magazines were joking at Capcom about not being able to count to 3.
Right.
Yep. So we have here Fei Long. So Fei Long was introduced as one of the 4 new challengers in Super Street Fighter 2. He's hails from Hong Kong, and Fei Long, like Kim Dragon, is a movie star looking to prove himself against real fighters in the tournament. I mean, that M. Bison sets up. I guess it's still pretty nebulous. M. Bison is like the villain. I don't know. It's weird. Anyways, but visually, come on, he's directly Bruce Lee.
Yeah, it's
totally.
very, very straightforward.
And
Bruce
the
Lee.
pixel work of that time, like they just like totally landed on such a cool identity
just
for Fei
beautiful.
Long. His stance,
and above all, we should mention this is the character that you play most often.
yeah, actually, yeah, in Super Turbo, which is like one of my favorite fighting games ever and will always be. I main Fei Long, and it was, I mean, I guess I don't really play Fei Long, and I don't main him in many other games because he'd show up and he was in Street Fighter Alpha 3, and he's cool in that game too, but it actually is like the home version of Street Fighter Alpha 3 he showed up in. He's in Street Fighter 4. He wasn't in Street Fighter 5. I hope he shows up in whatever the next Street Fighter game is. But yeah, in ST, Fei Long is super cool to me because he's basically like the way that you kind of play him is like your forward momentum. We can talk about his moves a little bit. So Fei Long, actually most Bruce Lee analogs in fighting games don't have like a fireball. It's they really stick to Bruce Lee as a close fighter, and it's usually about quick attacks, and it's usually about kind of combos and style. So those are like kind of like, I guess we should have done that right when I started talking about fighting games, but Liu Kang does shoot a fireball. I think like everybody in Mortal Kombat shoots a fireball. But Fei Long, if you do like the Hadouken motion, he has like a sliding forward punch. It's called the Rekka Ken, and that's actually like a 3-stage move where you can do it over 3 times, and he'll move forward with every attack. And he also has a rising, it's called Shin Kick. It's a rising dragon like flame kick. That's like your anti-air like dragon punch in the game. And so basically how I play Fei Long, and I think how most people that really are dedicated to him, you want to basically kind of play him like a grappler almost. He doesn't have a command grab, but you want to force your opponent back, and you want to control the space, and you want to basically, like Bruce Lee, it's the way of the intercepting fist. You're using those dash punches to kind of punish somebody whiffing an attack. And he actually has a lot of momentum if you can really get on your opponent and use throws and use specials and use kind of like your control and the footsies to keep control. You can take the round pretty quickly. He also does have some pretty stylish moves. In Super Turbo, they have super moves. So you can juggle. Like if you catch somebody in the air with one of your other special, there's like a kind of a arcing kick. You can juggle with the super, and landing that just feels so right. And I mean, me talking about Super Turbo, that could go forever, but he's like, for real, like one of my favorite Bruce Lees in fighting games, and he's just so cool. So, and this was kind of interesting to me because, so we're talking about 1993 now, so which is still the early 90s, but we're moving into the realm of 3D fighting games, which is still at a very simple state, and we're talking about like the first 3D fighting game, Virtua Fighter. Came out in the arcade, released by Sega, and actually not your typical Bruce Lee analog. The character I'm talking about is Jackie Bryant, and he's the blonde American fighter. I think he's from he's from San Francisco, but he's a Jeet Kune Do practitioner. Now, in the original Virtua Fighter, the characters have some personality, but it didn't really come out until like the sequels in the game. And but even in the first game, he have one of the moves that I also think is an iconic Bruce Lee move is the flip kick. So doing like basically like Guile's flash kick, where you flip in the air and kick your opponent, which actually like I think it's in Enter the Dragon when O'Hara grabs Lee's foot and then he counters him by doing a flip kick and kicking him out of it. Such a cool move, and in fighting games, especially in 3D fighting games, that's a move that you're gonna see any Bruce Lee analog do. But Sarah, his sister, who's also kind of a blonde, kind of actually, I found out that she's actually modeled after Sarah Connor from Terminator.
Oh,
which is crazy. Yeah, crazy to think about. But both of them are Jeet Kune Do practitioners. And like in the later games, like Virtua Fighter 5, Final Showdown, I think that's a super fun fighting game. And they can do stance switches, and footwork is a really important part of their gameplay. And Jackie has a lot of Bruce Lee like isms, like his hand motions, and he does these like kind of cool rapid kicks. He's just super cool. I love playing as him. And Sarah, actually, she's my main in Virtua Fighter 5, but I'm not super hardcore with that game.
I love the way that Virtua Fighter 1 looks. Like,
oh man, yeah.
Like that early 3D with like where everyone's just a bunch of blocks.
Yeah,
like,
no
it's
textures.
crazy. It's aged in a really cool way somehow, where it feels like this intentional aesthetic or something. But
I think that there's
still
like
remember seeing it for the first time. It's just the frame rate, the colors. It was amazing.
Yeah, the frame rate is a good point too, because that game ran super smooth, and I feel like nowadays kind of like that low polygon aesthetic is like really appealing to people, like, and I could totally see. And actually in Virtua Fighter 4 and actually the latest version of Virtua Fighter 5 Final Showdown, there are bonus outfits for each character that put them back into that original like flat polygon look. It's really fun to see that. I love it. Yeah. Okay, so now we're kind of veering a little away from fighting games, but this is 1994, and I'm talking about Super Punch-Out for the Super Nintendo. So the sequel to the original Punch-Out, super fun game, one of my favorites. There's a character in this game called Dragon Chan. So he's the only Punch-Out character that I can think of that uses kicks. He would fly across the screen, like to doing a jump kick, and you'd have to duck it. And he also has like a triple kick that you have to be very careful of. So when you see him,
Super Punch-Out's bonkers.
Yeah, that game's awesome.
It's such a cool game. I feel like it's such a, like, for being like a main Nintendo game, it's very underrated. I feel like
and
people talk about the original one, of course, and a lot of people have talked about the Wii one, which is so good too.
Yeah, that one's really good. But yeah, one of the things that I found out about Super Punch-Out, looking it up for this episode, is that it actually wasn't like officially released in Japan. It came out in the States in 94, but it was only released, and get this, it was released in 1998 in Japan, which is
weird,
insane to think about. And it was exclusively through, like, Nintendo had this ROM cartridge service where you had a blank cartridge and you could take it to a kiosk. Yeah, it was called Nintendo Power. That's what it was called in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you could download a game onto that cartridge. And Super Punch-Out was only available in Japan through that service, as far as I could tell when I was looking up.
It's so bizarre.
I was so surprised by that. That was crazy. But it's got really cool music, and the characters are gigantic, and they're all really cartoony looking. I love how that game looks. It's a real fun time. And it was, 1994, not too far along. So I thought that was really cool to mention. So also in 1994, we have, and this is like kind of first where we're actually, it's one of these movie tie-in games. You know how those can usually be.
Yeah.
So this is by Virgin Interactive, and it's Dragon: The Bruce Lee Story. This came out originally for the Genesis, and then it was ported over to the Super Nintendo. And it basically plays through the quote-unquote events from the movie starring Jason Scott Lee. And I mean, that movie, I don't know when the last time you guys saw it, but it's pretty liberal on its own.
Yeah, very much so. But one of the great '90s scores.
It's great,
by
yeah.
Randy Edelman, and the main theme ended up being used in like a gajillion trailers, like
Yep.
Following Dragon. So yeah, soft spot for that.
I don't think that the music from the movie is represented in the game, but this is also like a beat 'em up, and actually similar to the Bruce Lee Lives game. It's basically like a one-on-one beat 'em up, so stage to stage you're just fighting another opponent, and the animations are really nice. I like how the animations look, and you have actually a good selection of attacks, but it's just kind of weird. It's so like
Yeah.
it's. For some reason, it's cool with me when there's an analog of Bruce Lee, but when they're actually like putting Bruce Lee in a thing, it's like that's kind of weird, guys. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah, I know. I get you. Feels kind of like
sacrilegious or something?
morbid or something.
Yeah.
Oh
Like-
yeah, totally.
It's like Kurt Cobain in like Rock Band or whatever. Like,
yeah,
Guys,
yeah.
like,
I gotcha.
what are you doing?
For a second,
here?
I was like, "Oh, Kurt Cobain in like his 16-bit
Yeah,
action platformer," and
Yeah.
he's like,
yeah.
wearing
Kurt
his
Cobain
cardigan
and
and
Earthworm Jim.
dude, that sounds
Honestly,
incredible.
I wouldn't be shocked if there was some crazy like uncovered something or other where it was Kurt Cobain in
Yeah.
an SNES game.
Nice. Yeah, so that game's all right. It would be a game that when I would rent it, like, and I was like, all right, whatever. Don't need to really play this ever again. But okay, so still in 1994. So in the arcades in the 90s, so like everybody would always talk about Nintendo versus Sega, you know, the console wars. But
Mhm.
I mean, for me being a fan of going to the arcade in the 90s, I honestly feel like there was also a really cool rivalry between Sega and Namco. So
Yeah.
Sega would release a game, Namco would have their own answer, and then they kind of would jump back and forth. And Namco in 1994 released the first Tekken game. And the first Tekken game is really crude, but I think it looks a lot better than the original Virtua Fighter, and the characters kind of have a lot more personality to me. So starting in Tekken 1, we're introduced to Martial Law, and he would become a staple of the series, whether it's him or his son. His son, Forrest Law, is the Bruce Lee analog in Tekken 3, and following that, they would jump back and forth. But he's awesome. When it comes to 3D fighting games, he's my favorite Bruce Lee in a fight. He's got the flip kick. He eventually would have the 1-inch punch. He's got like the triple roundhouse. He's just super cool, super fun to use. He would later have the dragon kick, kind of the very dramatic jump leaping side kick. And he'd also have, I think it's just called the Dragon Stance, and you would put him in that kind of Bruce Lee swagger that I think everybody loves. And in the game though, his story, he's basically trying to win money to open up a martial arts school, but he's actually a chef by trade. So in a lot of the Tekken games, they have like those like rendered endings, and as the games go on, you see like him in the restaurant or maybe in the intro, and he would become buddies with Paul Phoenix in the game. And Paul Phoenix is kind of like the Chuck Norris analog in some ways, so they kind of have like a fun kind of buddy relationship in the game. So that as the games go on, that's really appealing to me. But oh man, Martial Law, and the way that he sounds is perfect. And actually, Katsuhiro Harada, the director of the Tekken series, he was the voice for Martial Law and Forest Law up until from like Tekken 1 all the way into Tekken 5.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so he did all the voicing for him. So the other thing, stepping out of video games, there was a very bad Tekken live action film. But Kung Lee played Law in the live action film, and we actually saw him in the Grandmaster. He fights against Tony Leung right at the beginning of the film, so that's pretty cool. Yep. Then a year later we get kind of Tekken but with weapons, and Soul Edge is the first game in that series. It would become known as Soul Calibur, a very popular series as well. And in the first game, there was a fighter that used nunchucks. His name is Li Long. And I feel like outside of him using nunchucks, that doesn't really qualify him as like a Bruce Lee analog. But in Soul Calibur, they introduced Maxi. And Maxi in Soul Calibur series is pure Bruce Lee. He's got kind of a cool pompadour. He's full of style, and his fighting stance is 100% influenced by Bruce Lee. And later games he would... Yeah, and he's super fun to play. He's one of those characters you can just jump in and just smack on buttons and get some cool stuff going. I really like him. Anytime somebody's playing as Maxi, they're having a fun time. But in 1995 also, there is Fatal Fury 3, Road to the Final Victory. So this I put this in a list because a lot of people bring this up, but there's a character called Han Fu, and he fights with nunchucks. But I honestly feel like his characterization and like his style is much more Jackie than Bruce Lee. He kind of has like these kind of funny animations. He's got a move where he kind of swings his nunchucks around, and if you hold the button down, he'll actually hit himself in the groin and have like a goofy like animation. And he also has like a counter move where he smacks his butt, and if you hit him, he kind of leaps away like in pain. And all of these are very Jackie characteristics. And he's actually
his hair kind of looks more Jackie when it's like bouncing around and stuff. Right. He has like a big smile on his face and stuff.
When we're starting to get to that point in history where Jackie really is ascending like internationally.
And I believe that his character in the story, I think he's a cop too, so that really lines him up with Jackie Chan, like super cop situation. And I mean, in Tekken we've got Lei Wulong, one of my favorite fighting game characters ever, and he's totally riffing on Jackie Chan and the police story stuff. So we're getting towards, we're still in the world of fighting games, but we're moving to 1996. So in the realm of 3D fighting games, there's also Tecmo, and they made the Dead or Alive series. And this was originally released in the arcade, and then following that, it would be ported to the PlayStation and I think Xbox, a bunch of games. And very similar to Virtua Fighter in a way, but I'd say like a more extreme, stylish version of Virtua Fighter. You've got a counter button, and there's a lot of like really dramatic like hazards in the stages, so you can like blow your character away, and they'll like land and it'll explode and launch them into the air. Really, really crazy, but a really fun game. And in this game, you have a Bruce Lee analog named Jan Lee, and he is a Jeet Kune Do practitioner, and he's entered the DOA tournament to prove that his style is the best. There we go, right? That's all you really need. But the thing that's interesting about Jan Lee that I realized studying up for this episode is that he learned Jeet Kune Do by watching Bruce Lee movies.
That's funny.
He isn't a riff on Bruce Lee. He was actually influenced.
Like the legacy.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of a cool take on that type of character. And you get everything with that too. He's got a really nice Bruce Lee like back and forth hop going on, and he's got some really great like 1-inch kind of punch moves, and dragon kick, launching people into the walls and seeing them blow up, fly into the air. So his name is actually a riff on Bruce Lee. So Lee Jun-fan John Lee, they kind of played around with the syllables and messed around with it. And so in Dead or Alive 3, he was actually motion captured by Ebinuma Lee, the guy that I talked about earlier for the Double Dragon games. I think that's so crazy because different company, but he so loves Bruce Lee that he actually ended up doing mocap for a lot of video games. So martial arts is a part of his life as much as video games are. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Dude, that's awesome.
Yeah. The other thing I want to mention is there's also a pretty questionable DOA film, but it's directed by Corey Yuen. And
right.
Yeah. So Jan Lee does not appear in the movie though, so that's kind of a bummer because that would have been cool to see Corey Yuen do some like Bruce Lee style stuff. So that's kind of like the bulk of my list, and I know I did a lot of talking. I think we're at like 50 minutes, and it was like all me.
Well, there'll be lots of clips and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
No, dude, but standing ovation for gathering all this together.
Thanks.
Yeah, for real.
Some definitely like deep cuts here.
Yeah, and there are some little like nods to Bruce Lee in games too. So, well, besides that, and the UFC games by EA, I think it was in UFC 2, they actually introduced Bruce Lee into the game. I think he was like DLC, and then he was in like UFC 3 and 4. I don't really play those games. They're not really my style.
That's fair.
Yeah, but it's still cool to see him realized. But it's also similar to like what I was saying. Yeah,
Kind of feels kind of icky.
it's kind of weird. Yeah, but whatever, that's fine. But so some other little things in other games. In Pokemon, there's a Pokemon like first
Hitmonlee.
generation. Yep, Hitmonlee and Hitmonchan, each kind of a nod to Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan.
Yeah.
In Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3, they introduced Iron Fist, which is a Marvel character, but a lot of his moves, I mean, rightly so, were influenced by Bruce Lee. And I think his like level 3 is awesome. It's like one of the coolest like 1-inch punches in a video game. I was talking to Matthew last week about Ape Escape a little bit, and Ape Escape is a really goofy series with a bunch of parodies on things, and of course there's a Enter the Dragon parody in Ape Escape 2 called Enter the Monkey. So that's pretty stupid.
It's funny. I feel like Enter the Monkey could have easily been a Bruceploitation movie too.
Yeah, easily. Oh. Yes, yeah, for sure. So in Bayonetta, a game that I really love, one of the weapons she can get is like they call them, jokingly, it's called gunchucks, but they're basically nunchucks that are like rifles, and it's called the Siphon. And when Bayonetta is using that weapon, she's totally vocalizing like Bruce Lee does. So that's pretty cool. And in Devil May Cry 3, Dante gets a weapon called Cerberus, which is like a tri nunchucks, and that's like really cool to see him riff on Bruce Lee doing that. Hopping in again to drop in a couple of extra honorable mentions. The first one, in Street Fighter Alpha, maybe not a character but a stage. There's a Coliseum stage in Street Fighter Alpha 1, and there are cats climbing around, and it's a very obvious reference to the iconic fight between Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris in Way of the Dragon, and also in X-Men Children of the Atom, also by Capcom around the same time, Magneto. Kind of a strange pull, but I think it looks awesome. Magneto's idle stance is a direct reference to Bruce Lee doing the after image hand wave. His idle stance is pretty much the same thing, and I think it rules. And then that's pretty much all of the major hits for me when it comes to Bruce Lee. But I mean, just going over this list, you can see how influential he was.
Oh yeah,
you know, he's just an icon, and it's more than pop culture for a lot of people, but pop culture is a big part of it too.
No, I mean, we've said on a few occasions how video gamey a lot of those kung fu movies in the 70s really are. Like you can feel a lot of the influence on video games and like their structure. So it makes sense that a lot of those people would be watching these a lot and thus Bruce Lee is a huge part of that. So it all kind of comes together.
And also, as we prepare to actually start grappling with his movies, and not just grappling, like enjoying the hell out of his movies. I mean, I think what's clear with going through the list is like his popularity never wanes, and that's because Bruce Lee isn't just a star. It's like that rarefied air of actual legend,
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, very few people that you would like from the 20th century you'd put in that category. Like, I guess like Marilyn Monroe or Jimi Hendrix or something.
Right.
Where it really feels like at this point, like their notoriety will kind of like never wane. And it's, I don't know, kind of beautiful to see how enduring like Bruce's impact is in these games, even if it's so hard to actually like get it right.
Mm-hmm.
But that probably means that developers are going to just keep trying until they get closer and closer.
Yeah, and Bruce Lee is like one of these things that literally, like, if you're out and you see somebody with a Bruce Lee shirt, you can just be like, yo, like, what's up? And it'd be like, yeah, cool, like a nod to each other. Or I was also thinking, we're talking about video games and this is merchandise. Like, what would have been like the earliest like Bruce Lee type merchandise? And honestly, I just think a pair of nunchucks. Like, when I was a kid, I had some nunchucks and I just played around with them. And it's something that's like not even like a licensed thing, but you just see somebody playing around with a nunchuck and you immediately think of Bruce Lee. Well, Bruce Lee or Michelangelo now, but still, like, it's just, he just is like so iconic, so huge of a character that it will endure forever. And yeah, I'm just super excited for us to dig into this. For a long time I felt intimidated by it because I thought, man, so many people love Bruce Lee, we just gotta really do this justice. But honestly, right now I'm just ready to have fun with it, and really excited for us to.
Yeah, totally. And it really just speaks to what we all think of Bruce is like, we want to honor the legend. It's like, you don't feel worthy. But honestly, with everything that like we've all had to endure in the world in the last couple of years, it's like, yeah, let's enjoy some of the legend.
Yeah, I agree. Well, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Carlos, for putting all of that together.
Oh, you're welcome.
And I'm looking forward to putting together all the episode that you all just heard. So thank you for listening to the episode. If you like the show, you can leave us a review on whatever you're listening to this on. I think you can rate stuff on like Spotify and Podcast Addict. You can rate stuff now. But yeah, rate us on Apple Podcasts is a big one too. So rate us there. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We're at Here's the Number 3 Podcast on all three of them. And of course, we are starting next week with our Bruce Lee arc. And we're starting with Big Boss, right?
Yeah, so I mean, if you're looking at Bruce Lee's filmography, it does reach a little further back than that, and we could really get into that history a bit when we start on these episodes, but we're going to start with 1971's The Big Boss.
Well, until next week, we're taking a look at 1971's The Big Boss. I'm Matthew.
I'm Marty.
I'm Carlos.
And we are the Heroes 3. Remember your training. Heroes 3 is part of the Mercado Brothers Podcast Network.